you can learn a fair bit by attending a crooked university. I mean, well, you can learn how to withstand corruption, right? I mean, you can learn how to craft an argument as an undergraduate that's so solid that even the professors who are ideologically motivated are compelled by whatever's left of their conscience to grade you appropriately. And so that's difficult, but it's possible. But as a psychologist, especially if you want to be a clinical psychologist, look, the only thing clinical psychology has to offer in terms of the curative process is truth. I mean, people come to a psychologist to confess. I'm dead serious about that, you know. The person comes to tell you, the diagnostic process is a confessional process. The person comes in, if you don't know that clinical psychologists are secular priests, you're just not really paying attention. I mean that even historically. I mean, Carl Rogers was a seminarian, for crying out loud. He was a Christian missionary. That's a good example there. I mean, there were secularist, humanist psychologists, but they're just Christians who didn't know it. So the person comes in and they tell you their troubles, and they have to do that honestly, because otherwise you don't know what their troubles are, and neither do they. And that's a confessional process. And if you're very careful when you're the listening ear, which is part of the dialogical process, then they believe they can trust you, and hopefully that's the truth, and then they can lay their cards on the table, and you can start to understand why they're suffering. And then if you help them strategize in relationship to their suffering, they can find their way, and that's a redemptive process aimed at atonement. And that's all predicated on logos, right? The core of the dialogical process. And logos is the spirit of truth oriented by love. And that's how the therapeutic process works. It's a recreation of the optimized parental environment. That's another way of thinking about it. But that all falls apart in the absence of a strict commitment to humility and truth. And if the psychological profession has abandoned that, which has happened to a large degree now, in no small part because of compulsion by law, you have to validate the person's identity. That's the last bloody thing you do as a therapist. You come to see me and ask me to validate your identity. It's like, go find someone else to talk to. You know, it's like, if you're in the Garden of Paradise already, I'll validate your identity. But if you're stumbling around stupidly suffering like everybody else, then we're going to do some investigation to find out just exactly what's wrong with your identity, not how it's perfect already, right? And I'm not making light of this. It strikes right to the core of the matter. Every form of therapy is conversion therapy, right? You convert the poor, miserable, blind, stumbling bastard into something halfways capable of living in the world, which is what you're trying to do to yourself. And you better do that with your eyes open and in truth. And if you don't do that as a therapist, well, you're not a therapist. I mean, you're someone who thinks that their job is to convince 13-year-old girls to chop off their breasts. Yeah. Fucking ha. It's terrible. It's terrible what's happened. It's terrible. It's brutally barbaric. And it's part of a very, very deep lie. And my profession is unbelievably complicit in it, and it's appallingly shameful, just as it is in many ways to be an academic. So I don't know what to tell you about pursuing the profession. What I can tell you, there's great books. You know, read them. Ignore your professors.